I think it was Peter Singer, and it says, if it is in our power to prevent something bad from happening without thereby sacrificing anything of comparable moral importance, we ought morally to do it. So with that in mind, when I read that, I was thinking, I was, questioning myself, and I was thinking, if I'm on my way to work in the morning and I reject a charity appeal in the middle of the street that I would have time for, but I just choose to reject it, that's asking for maybe a few quid a month to help feed starving children, I reject it, I carry on. But then on that same walk to work, I stop and buy an overly expensive coffee before I go into the office. Is that should I feel shame? Is that morally wrong?
I think it depends, right? It's a very nuanced issue in my view. I think that in that isolated situation, it's probably wrong, right? If you've got this one situation, this one kind of opportunity to help someone in need, and you decide to buy a coffee instead, I think you've failed to discharge an ethical duty. The problem is that we don't live in a world where we have this kind of one option, right? Peter Singer's famous example is the drowning child, right? It comes from the passage you just quoted was from Famine, Affluence, and Morality, which is a kind of early essay that he wrote on this subject. And he asks the reader to consider walking along and you see a child drowning in a shallow pond. You can go and save this child, but if you do so, you'll ruin your shoes. And he says, if someone refuses to save the child on the grounds that it will like ruin their shoes, they'd be an ethical monster. That would be one of the most horrible things you could do. And yet, if those shoes cost about £50, right, and someone comes to you and says, hey, listen, you can save this child drowning on the other side of the world, well, not drowning, but starving on the other side of the world, or dying of malaria by giving us £50, is it not the same thing by refusing to give that money because you want to buy some shoes instead? Is that not the same thing as refusing to save the drowning child because you're going to ruin your shoes? And like, on the surface of it, yeah. Like, why would it make a difference how far away the person is, right? Like, if it's wrong for me to kind of save the £50 that I want to kind of keep kind of in my shoes as an asset and not save that child, why is that so wrong? But if you take that child and just move them far away, now suddenly it's okay. It's permissible for me to refuse to save them. And that's the power of Peter Singer's argument. It's like, man, I really can't see a way around this. And that's because I don't think there is one. I think that in that situation, they are essentially the same. The problem is, right, and the reason this is complicated is because we don't live in a world where you're just going to have kind of one option to save somebody. You've got charities left, right, and center. You've got endless ways in which you could continue to pauperize yourself, sell all of your possessions, and give to these various charities. The situation is more analogous to walking down the road and seeing like thousands and thousands of children all drowning in a pond, right? Now, clearly, you should probably try and save some of them, right? But what if it's the case that, like, an example I gave in the video that you mentioned, there's a paper, and I can't remember the guy who wrote it, but the paper's called "Sometimes It's Okay to Let the Baby Drown," or something like that. Which is or the child drown. It's a fairly horrible title, but he imagines this situation in which hackers have got into your bank account and they're taking out $5 every 5 minutes, and there's some legal loophole, which means that the bank can't reimburse you. And the only way for you to stop it happening is to go to the bank and cancel your account. And if you run out of money in your account, the bank will just start seizing your belongings to make up for the debt, right? So you're losing $5 every single 5 minutes until you go to the bank and stop them. Now, let's say on your way to the bank, you come across like tens of thousands of drowning children, and they take 5 minutes each to save. Question is, how many children are you going to save? Right, clearly, it would be wrong to walk past them and not save any of them. But if you save one child, you lose $5. Okay, fine. Save two, you lose 10. Okay, so on and so forth. What if it's going to cost you like $1,000? Maybe you should probably still save the child, I guess. What if it's going to be like 10 grand? Okay, yeah, no, this is horrible. Of course, money is never as important as a child's life. We should probably still save the children. Okay, what if like now the bank is like seizing your house and taking away your car, and you're not going to have anywhere to live because, the money's still coming out and they need to repay it? Well, I think we would say it's at least permissible at some point around that area for the person to stop saving the children, go into the bank and stop their account, even though the rest of the children are going to die. Now we have to imagine that this situation repeats every single day. Every day when you wake up, the money's coming out of your account, and the only way to stop it is for you to go into the bank. You live just next to the bank, though, so you can wake up first thing, go straight to the bank and cancel your account. But every single day, there's a new batch of children just dying all in front of you. And the question is, like, how do you live your life? Right? Do you live your life such that you spend all of your time and effort saving these children up until the point where the bank is literally going to seize your house? Right? What that means is that you will never, ever have enough money to ever buy an album, have a Spotify subscription, to go out for a meal, to spend time with your family, to go on a holiday, to do any of this kind of stuff. The only thing that you will ever do in your entire life is own a house and save drowning children. That seems too much to ask of a person. Right? It seems like there's some room to say that this person should be able to allow some of those children to die, to save some of their money, even just for the sake of doing like more trivial things, like, you know, going on a holiday, or eating a nice meal, or listening to some music, or buying a guitar, whatever it might be. Right? There seems to be at least some permissibility in here. The question, at least, is not as simple as it first seems. So if we put forward this principle that Singer puts forward, which is that if we can save somebody without sacrificing something of considerable moral importance, like our shoes, then we should do it. Yes, absolutely. The problem is that principle universalizable? Can we generalize it to the extent that you should always be doing that, right? And I'm not sure that that's so obvious, because if you make the situations actually the same, with the kind of endless supply of drowning children that you will always be able to save by continually selling more of your possessions, I don't think we'd think someone is doing anything wrong by, you know, going to the bank, putting a stop on the money going out of their account, even though they may have to allow some children to die for that. And if that's true, then I think analogously, it's not wrong to sometimes refuse to give to charity. I think it would be wrong to never give to charity or never do anything charitable, in the same way that it would be wrong to walk past all of the children and not save a single one of them. But on some days, at some points, and at some point along the track of kind of saving the children, you're going to have to say, you know, sorry, bucko, I'm going to the bank. And I think that's the equivalent of saying, I'm not going to give this person my money, I'm going to go and buy a coffee. It's okay to generally have a rule by which you allow yourself to do that, even if kind of in isolation, if that were the kind of only considerable factors in play, what you would have done there would have been wrong. You've got to consider the context. You've got to consider the repeatability. You've got to consider the kind of implications that this view will have for the rest of your entire life.